Friends from near and far, thank you for coming and joining us this morning. My name is Peled. With many of you I've corresponded through emails over the last year, actually. And indeed, we set out to do this conference a little over a year ago because I felt, I saw many feel, that campus free speech is under serious strain in this current moment, in this ongoing current moment of polarization, of turbulence. And I found myself facing questions I didn't feel I have definite answers to. And I knew that I wasn't alone. I don't have the answers, perhaps because of insufficient wisdom or knowledge, but I suspect that is not the full explanation, because these are genuinely hard questions. Questions whose answers can be sought only through weighing competing considerations, testing arguments against reality, exposing their implications, and being willing to revise our own views again and again and again. And even then, we probably won't arrive at anything we can confidently call answers. We're more likely to produce what Max Weber famously described as competing gods, as visions that none of which can assume decisive, factual, scientific authority over the other. So if no answers, why a conference like this? Well, back to Weber suggests that this kind of academic work will bring us more clarity. It will help us better understand the consequences of our choices, implications of our values. So we won't have definite answers at the end of this day, but if we can contribute anything to human progress as academics, it's just as runners in a relay race, passing a baton that we didn't create and we won't carry to the finish line, but hopefully we'll run our leg seriously today. That's the essence of our mission here. So I'll offer some opening thoughts in a few moments to those discussions, but first a few housework items. So the panels are written by A and B. You can see there's a room A and room B where we'll have our discussions. We have a very intense program, so hopefully we'll stick to time, and presenters will stick to time frames, and we'll have time for Q&As. And Q&As we don't get to do within the classrooms, hopefully we can do in breaks and afterwards. I think that's as much as I have in terms of housework. So I'm excited to introduce Ruthy Lowenstein Lazar, which is our dean. She's a professor of criminal law and criminal procedure. Also much of an academic activist. For many years, she led our vast legal clinics center here at the Haim School of Law. And I can proudly say that under her leadership, and also that of her predecessors here, this school, the Haim School of Law, was never one where any professor had to think twice before speaking or writing their minds, including knowing that even when we slip into our margins of errors, she, as is the tradition here, has our back. And I think we here enjoy something close to an ideal of academic freedom. So with that, Dean Lowenstein Lazar.
So I'm delighted to have you all here and making this long journey. I know that some of you came from Australia and from the US, and I guess the Israelis also made a long journey because of the traffic. I will begin with a personal story, and I'm not sure what we will think about it, although he knows about this story. A few weeks ago, one of my professors here invited a guest lecturer to his class. I find this guest's views deeply, deeply troubling. This person expressed openly via social media racist views against various groups in the Israeli society. This person also engaged in severe and reprehensible defamation of the Supreme Court justices, and you know what's happening here in Israel these days. Now, everything this individual said fell within the formal boundaries, of freedom of speech and freedom of expression. His or her words and views are legal, racist, troubling, disturbing, in contrast to any and my basic moral views, but legal and within the boundaries of freedom of speech. So as the dean who leads the school, I felt very strongly that I do not want him or her on our campus, on our faculty, speaking with young students. And So I said to my professor that I'm not willing to have his or her as a speaker. Well, freedom of speech. It was evident that I intervened in the professor's academic freedom. I did not hide it. However, for me, the question was not that of freedom of speech or academic freedom, but of proper education and basic values. I felt very uncomfortable having this person who expresses extreme racist views and uses extreme words, and I'm gentle here, towards the Supreme Court talking with young law students. That experience forced me to confront an uncomfortable question. What does it really mean to defend freedom of speech in the academy and elsewhere, especially when the speech in question violates our deepest moral and professional instincts? So we often speak of freedom of speech as an idea, but it's also a lived practice, particularly when speech is offensive or profoundly at odds with our values. The academia is a space of open inquiry and rigorous debate. Academic education encourages us to critically thinking and constant challenge of what we hear and learn, and that's what we want our students to learn and feel. Yet universities are also communities with educational responsibilities, ethical commitments, and power asymmetries between faculty, between the professors and students. And this is not a theoretical today, this tension. In Israel and elsewhere, universities have become central arenas for some of the most polarizing debates of our time. Questions of identity, politics, justice, and group belonging collide on our campuses and our classes, often in ways that test not only our policies, but our judgment, our leadership, and our moral clarity. As academic leaders, and we are all academic leaders to our students, and scholars, and activists, our responsibility is not to eliminate this tension, but to think about it, discuss it, reconstruct it, and reframe it. Defending freedom of speech does not mean endorsing every view that is voiced and give it a space within our homes, our academic home. And, referring to my opening story. But neither does discomfort alone justify exclusion or silence. The university must remain a place where ideas are met with arguments, with critiques, where harmful claims are challenged through scholarship, teaching, and where disagreement is handled through engagement. At the same time, freedom of speech must be exercised and protected with responsibility, integrity, and maybe you'd be surprised by the word I choose, empathy and care. The challenge is to cultivate campuses that are intellectually open, ethically grounded, and attentive to the real impact of words on our individuals and communities. And I'm thinking about our students in every word I wrote here. We should do it while listening, seeing, and I would add by feeling. We should use words with emotional intelligence. Only then we would be able to communicate. When I write these opening remarks, I ask myself, would I have decided differently? Thinking about things that you're intuitively doing. And the answer is no. This was not only a matter of my personal discomfort with that individual's views and statements, but rather my view that freedom of speech does not obligate me, as a dean, to provide a platform for everyone within my academic home. And at the same time, the complex question involved in allowing spaces for voices that stand in direct opposition to everything I believe is continuing to accompany me both as a person, as Ruthy, and as a dean. This conference invites us to think about these and other questions, not in abstract, but in the complex reality of our institutions, our societies, and our current moment. I hope it will be a space for honest reflection and deep discussion. I hope it will be a space of communication. Thank you, Roy, for organizing it. Just a second. And for saying, and Roy is saying yes to everything in the good way. So thank you, Roy, for this great conference. And thank you for Ilan for helping, and Shachar and everybody else. Enjoy your day.
I feel like opening that case for debate now, but we won't. We won't. So, as I said, a few of my thoughts going forward. Thoughts about our ivory tower here, and yeah. So a few thoughts about our ivory tower here and the environment surrounding it. The ivory tower is usually invoked today as an insult, a symbol of detachment from the real world. But there is much to be said in favor of such detachment. We cannot think clearly amid constant noise, time pressures, insecurities, or threats. And that is why societies build and maintain institutions of higher education and award them some freedom, often through taxpayer money. And just saying the word taxpayer makes me feel like I blew a huge hole straight through our ivory tower. But can we legitimately ask for public funding and then ask to be left alone? What does society owe us, and what do we owe in return? It's not a theoretical question. As some of you know, this conference originally was supported by a grant from the US State Department. 4 days after President Trump's inauguration, we were asked to remove 3 specific letters from our call for papers. I dare repeat the letters. I'll just say 2 of them came after ABC and 1 after FGH. A day later, the grant was canceled regardless of what we do with those letters altogether. Just yesterday here in Israel, the Minister of Education demanded from the Tel Aviv University not to allow a student group in the university to host an event screening a documentary critical of Israel's forces in the 1948 war. So do American or even Israeli taxpayers have a duty to support us? I don't think they do. But I do think the world was a better place when governments realized that it's in the public interest to invest in this kind of intellectual work without meddling with it. And I think as citizens, not as academics necessarily, we can expect governments to afford some ivory tower autonomy to academia. And some of the presentations here deal with how governments fail us on that front. And how we need to push back. But aside pushing back to governments, we also need to ask ourselves, are we making the best case to show that we are deserving of such autonomy for our campuses? We often say that academia is entrusted with the search for truth. I don't know that we always say all the truth about the search for truth. Consider relationship, Ruthy mentioned it in a way, between power and truth, right? In the second half of the 20th century, I think, powerful postmodern strands of academic thoughts exposed the ways in which social power structures shape knowledge, suppress voices, undermine claims of neutrality. And that was real progress, and it brought real clarity to academic discourse and public discourse in general. What was less discussed is how these insights also enabled academia itself and certain strands within it to accumulate power for themselves. Academics claiming not just to seek truth, but to have found it, logically argue to silence opposing voices that are opposed to truth found. Progress was made, and no more progress was to be made, so no more voices needed to be heard. And some of the presentations here today alarmingly tell stories of silencing within the ivory tower with that ideology in the background. And if we are to deserve protections for the work we do, then we need to be honest about these things and willing to hear opposing voices, as uncomfortable and unsettling as they may be. Which leads me to my last point. Advantages and disadvantages of the ivory tower set aside, reality necessarily bangs on its walls all the time. We here have many students and faculty that suffered loss on October 7th. We have many students that fought in the war that followed. Some saw their friends killed. Others live with ongoing trauma of those events. We have Arab students, if fewer in number, who may have family members subjected to the immense suffering in Gaza, or simply identify with their co-nationals. Can we say anything of value as academics without taking these emotions seriously into account? So we need some detachment for our academic work, but the campus is not only an intellectual space, it is also part of society, and it is a community within itself. So it's our core mission to discuss and debate. We cannot solve these tensions in campus just over a glass of beer, because it's our job to debate. And when our research leads us to unpopular conclusions, then it is our duty to voice those, unpopular, unpatriotic as they may be, or seemingly unpatriotic. But we also need to think if we can do that while respecting our duties to other community members, for instance, students who feel offended. Early in the war, there was a case at Hebrew University where a faculty member questioned some well-documented Hamas atrocities. 80% of her law faculty colleagues signed a letter accusing her of spreading falsehoods and inflaming tensions between Jews and Arabs. Interestingly, some of those same colleagues signed another letter condemning the university administration for considering disciplinary action against her, this time invoking academic freedom. Other argues that this was never a matter of academic freedom at all, but of political animosity masquerading as scholarship. And then others argue that it was simply bad camaraderie within the community. So the threats in this environment become more and more acute. They're no longer just from police threatening to shut a conference down. They may come in the form of a dean, not this one, but a dean or a president standing over our shoulder, worried about public relations or about government funding. It could be just staring students, intimidating professors, that happens too, or journalists or podcasters or TikTokers who can turn a scholar into a public enemy overnight and literally ruin her life. It can be students targeting other students, doxing them, threatening them, or attacking them because of their views or their identity, Jewish or Israeli, in many campuses now. Sometimes it is still the police, something many of us thought belonged to the past, but which reappeared even in the United States, where courts found that students were arrested for nothing but their pro-Palestinian views. So just not mapping out all these threats can make one dizzy and run frantically to find the lost keys to this imaginary ivory tower that probably never existed. So I have some answers to offer. I'm not going to do that now. I just hope today's discussions will challenge each of our answers, sharpen them, perhaps even unsettle them. I hope they will help us think more clearly about how to build campuses worthy of their name, places where all views expressed in good faith and by people of all faiths are welcome and also open to scrutiny. So thank you all for coming. I look forward to our discussions. Get something to drink before you go into the classes, and we can start our